This is Speak Earth. I'm Case Bradford. Thanks for tuning in to this episode with Christian Van Camp at CVC Wellness across social media. He makes amazing videos about holistic health, vitality. He's a men's lifestyle coach. You can find everywhere to get in touch with him down below. Check out his Instagram at CVC Wellness, YouTube channel, Twitter. All the social medias are down there. He's highly creative, very focused, and compelling. Makes amazing videos, and I'm glad we had a chance to sit down and connect so I could learn more about his philosophy and perspectives on life. We dive deep into the awakening that we are currently living through. We talk about manifesting success, creating, cultivating ideas, avoiding distraction, not being used by technology, but leveraging tech to create a cooler world. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I appreciate you tuning in. Hope you enjoy it as well. If you are a new listener, welcome. If you are a seasoned listener, welcome back. If you feel called to contribute to this podcast, I came up with a few ideas. One is to leave a 5-star review on the Apple app or the Spotify app. Those are really helpful for Speak Earth. Another is to share an episode across social media. You could send out a tweet or post it on your Instagram story, something like that. I guess you could send a letter to your grandma if you wanted. A third way would be to move to a small town in France, learn the language, get embedded with the culture there. You're milking the cows, making the fromage, you're picking the grapes, you're stomping on the grapes with your bare feet, turning it into wine, you're learning the language, everybody's name, becoming integrated in with the culture, and then get elected mayor of the town. I think they probably have mayors. And then when nobody's looking, change the name of the town to Speak Earth Podcast. And I think that would get a large amount of media coverage probably, and it would help the podcast grow. So those are 3 ideas. Do with that what you will. You don't have to do anything. I appreciate you listening. Thank you. And yeah, there's also, if you want to buy anything, I've got links down below from our podcast show sponsors. So you get a discount, I get a small kickback, and that's another cool way. There's Rizel shoes. These are amazing earthing shoes made from leather, which feels great on the bare feet and allows you to access the free electron flow on the surface of the earth, which is a great way to bring down inflammation, elevate vitality, and then equip foods. I love this brand. They've got great supplements like beef protein isolate, just one single ingredient, unflavored beef, doesn't taste like beef, and it's a great way to get more protein, colostrum, collagen, all single ingredient whole food supplements that can help your body mind work a little bit better. And yeah, so that's it for this rambling intro. Enough jibber jabber from me. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks again, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Christian Van Camp. How's it going?
Case, my man. I'm ready to unpack the case.
Awesome. Really looking forward to this conversation. We connected a while back and were in some communication, and then just somehow out of the blue, we were able to reconnect. And when I was thinking of podcast guests, you were one of the first people that came to mind, because you've got a very bright perception and creativity. It's rare to find in this world someone who really knows their purpose and is able to share in a way that is compelling and engaging. So I'd first like to start with appreciate the work that you're doing. Grateful that you took the time to join me to go create this episode, and stoked to dive in.
Likewise, man. Likewise. There's a lot of brilliant minds, and the more we collaborate and come together, the more that expansiveness, portrays into the world. So I'm excited to see what we can chop up today.
Absolutely. We were talking a little bit about this, having a bit of a wide-ranging riff session about the state of the world and what could be coming down the pipe, and how to sort of engage with reality as it is, seeming so unstable and potentially chaotic. And one piece of that puzzle, I think, is the unstable nature of society that was uncovered during the past few years. How did that affect your life, going through what could be called a pandemic or a pandemic, all that chaos that happened in the past few years? How did that shape the man that you are today?
Well, ironically, and I think a lot of you guys listening to this can relate to me, is the whole world was shutting down. Everyone was fearful, loaded up in like what does the future hold for us? You know, everything just slowed down immensely. For me, everything sped up. I was absolutely stoked in my personal life, not in the state of the world, of course, but like, just like, wow, like, my intimate relationships totally sprouted far deeper because we were just spending more time with one another, and having that free time after losing my job. I was working at right when it kickstarted. On the side, I was working at a kava CBD bar, and so if you guys don't know what kava is, it's a very relaxing tea that's from Polynesian islands and Hawaii, Vanuatu, those regions, and it's been used for hundreds of thousands of years. And they brew this root up into a tea, and it's very calming, relaxing, very therapeutic. So really good for anxiety and sleep, and just a nice, basically nature's Xanax, I like to call it. So I worked at this kava bar, worked at this CBD lounge. It was amazing. It was so chill there. It attracted the coolest people in town. And then that completely shut down, turned into a ghost town. It was very, very strange. I was like, man, what's the future hold for this? And I was just finishing up my degree in nutrition. And during all this time, I was like, this is interesting. Now it's really a time to slow down for us to really come back inward. Like, what have we been doing as a culture? What have I been doing as an individual in my life? And it really gave me that time to take a step back, look at the objective position of my life and where I want to go, because everything slowed down. Everything was shut down. So intimate relationships prospered. I got a crystallized vision for where I wanted to go in life more so, because I didn't have as many of the extrinsic distractions coming into play. And so overall, man, I mean, the brink of it, 2020 was one of the best years of my life, in all honesty. Like, I went out in nature so much more often, went on camping trips all summer, that summer of 2020, a lot of traveling. Like, it was absolutely amazing. And, I think that's one of those things that it's like we have these external infiltrators that can really shift the way we perceive the world, and the news, the social media, the fear mongering, all the things that were going on. It didn't faze me whatsoever. And I was always deep in my heart, like, something's fishy about all of this, right? Like, no one I'm meeting personally is dying or getting sick. My friends and family, they are not dying and getting sick, but we're seeing on the news that thousands and millions of people, there's this tally of numbers of people dying, going to the hospitalizations. And yet, like, they're even having footage of the hospitals and they're empty. Like, so there's all these little things like, this is a little weird. If the government's pushing us this much, do we really trust the government? And I've always been kind of in the conspiracy land myself before all this happened, back even years prior to this. And so I always had an itch that something's up here. And I never fell for it. And I never fell for it once. I always trusted my deep intuition with this and just paced myself, didn't judge anyone, but really kept inward with what I was thinking of the state of the world. And that gave me a lot of freedom. And I think a lot of us get in these chains, these prison states of our mind based on the outside world's perspective of the world. And so I don't know, man, going off of that full throttle, like, I had the most amazing kickstart when COVID hit. And even today, like, I'm so thankful all this has unfolded, because I think it's awakened many people to some of these difficulties we've experienced as a collective.
Absolutely. We are 100% in the midst, the beginning stages of a mass awakening that was catalyzed by the coronavirus pandemic. And man, it's a beautiful thing to behold, because so many more people are taking control of their health, becoming sovereign individuals when it comes to, they're wanting land, they're wanting to get back to farming, they want to reconnect to nature, reconnect to health, reconnect to true, authentic vitality and life. And it's not happening at a super amazing, mass critical, widespread scale yet, but we're seeing the seeds of this grassroots movement really grow. And I see you as certainly a leader within this movement, especially in the realm of holistic health. You've certainly got a strong sense of mastery of that game, of that protocol, that process, that system of habits. And when it comes to that piece of the puzzle, were you always interested in health, or is this something that clicked on at some point in your life, which you were then able to learn and share for others?
Yeah, it's multifaceted, all the things that came into play to inspire me down this trajectory. It's like that domino effect, right? Once one domino falls, it's like, oh man, all these other ones start falling down. So I always had this itch, or another itch I'm saying, but it was an itch. It was like this, okay, something's like notifying me in my body that something's going to happen. Then I reach for it and scratch it, in a sense, in a metaphor term. But deep down, I always had this feeling, this intuition that I was going to do something related to health or fitness, lifestyle related, because I think this was all inspired through the trajectory of my childhood and my difficulties with my family's health, my personal health, then having a lot of partying stages throughout high school of drinking, of cannabis, of excessive play, and not having that deep discipline and work. So deep down, I always had this deeper intuition within my soul. But it's something that's like that primal instinct you feel that's like in hindsight, you're like, man, I wish I did that. I knew I had this feeling that I should have said that or should have done that. We all been there before. And that's that. It's like, do we listen to that stream of consciousness or do we push it aside? That gut instinct. And I always felt that gut instinct. And eventually it just led into the, where I'm at today when it comes to coaching men and helping a lot with nutrition and these fitness and different fundamentals with holistic health. So yeah, the cascade of events that happened throughout my life, my biggest inspiration I'll always go back to is my little sister, Nina. She had a heart transplant back in March of 2014. But prior to that, she was in the hospital for about 3 to 4 months, basically slowly fading away and dying. Like she got under 100 pounds. She had pneumonia. And to preface, she was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which is basically like a 3-chambered heart. All of us today, the majority of us have a 4-chambered heart. So she had a completely sealed up part of her heart. The atrium on the left side of her heart was basically completely sealed up with muscle. And so as a child, as a newborn, throughout her life, she was in and out of the hospital, constantly having procedures. And eventually that heart just began to fail. And so in Christmas Day of 2013, she was administered to the hospital. Weirdest time of the year when everyone's like coming together, celebrating Christmas and all that. Nina was in the hospital. My mom was in the hospital. My dad was visiting her, and I would visit her periodically. And it just was a different time of the year, and eventually it led into that failing heart, which led into the gift of this new ticker that's keeping her alive. And so I'm really big on donating life. I'm really big on natural healing because there's 2 things that come into play for me. I'm against, in many ways, the pharmaceutical industry, big pharma, all of that. But I'm very much for acute issues that arise for a lot of us. You get injured. This is where Western medicine's fruitfulness comes out, right? My little sister would not be alive today if it weren't for her anti-rejection pills for her heart medicine, right? She would not be alive today if it weren't for the incredible doctors that did the procedures on her, the nurses, right? So beautiful. However, we've taken it to the next level and we've amplified the power of Western medicine and totally shadowed down in America this natural healing that's been around for thousands of years. Ayurveda, right? Ancient Ayurveda from India. There's so many practices that are proven to help people. Homeopathy. We got different areas with traditional Chinese medicine and herbs and things like that. They work and they don't have any deleterious effects associated with them. Today, we're like, okay, let's just pop out the pills, things like that. Let's go into the office. Let's do these, chemo treatments and all that. And the efficacy around them is so diminished compared to what we have with natural healing. And so I've merged this idea of like, how do we merge Western medicine and all this beautiful modern science due to Nina's circumstance with natural healing, which led her into where she's at today with, eating nutritious foods, keeping her on her feet, movement, fresh air, sunlight, all those things, healthy relationships. Like those are things not talked about enough. Like a doctor is taught when he goes through school how to study all the different, pharmacological things to prescribe. He's not, or she's not prescribed or taught the things based on natural holistic health, right? And so the culmination of these experience cases is crazy. Just thinking about like how all these little things I just started building this awareness towards at 15, 16 years old. And then I was like, okay, I'm for sure going into fitness. Then eventually that led into fitness is not enough. Nutrition is going to help you really out. So then I merged those 2 together. And I realized, wow, your mindset actually has a big player in whether or not you actually heal and how you continue going forward and making this a lifestyle. So I'm all about, with that being said, the mindset, the gut health, and the muscle. So mind, gut, muscle.
Awesome. And props to you for hearing that call and choosing to act on it, to take that courageous leap each step of the way, going from fitness and learning, oh, okay, this isn't quite enough, and taking the next step on from that to the learning about gut health and learning about mindset and now combining all those and synthesizing them into your own thing where you're like, I've got all these pieces of the puzzle that I've got from different teachers and modalities, and I'm coalescing them together into this new sort of system for folks to make sense of. And you did all the hard work to make it easy for others to kind of take a golden bridge to get to a higher place in life. And I guess what's coming to mind now is I'm curious, who are some of your favorite kind of teachers or role models along this path who you learned a lot from?
I love that. Yeah, and the funny part is like we have at our fingertips this little device with all these podcasts. Like, this podcast right here, for instance, has so much valuable information, and we have YouTube. We have so many free resources, or even very affordable ones. Like Coursera is a really cool platform you can look up, guys, and just basically go through any course on any topic whatsoever, whether it's business, it's finance, it's entrepreneurship, it's nutrition. It could be anything, anatomy and physiology, whatever. So it's like, you know, it's interesting. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the educational system, in college and stuff, which I did, and I think it's one of those things that can be very effective for the discipline approach, which it did teach me a lot of things on discipline. But man, just like take advantage of what's in front of you, just research and geek out on that. So for me at a young age, I got inspired by big figures like Ben Greenfield, huge on Ben Greenfield. Like I started diving into his work. He was one of the first podcasters I dove into, and I heard him on Joe Rogan when I was first listening to Joe Rogan. He was like the first guy, everyone was talking about him when I was in like high school. And he's still huge right now, of course. And he brought on some amazing people that I started going down rabbit holes on. So it was like Joe Rogan led into like people like random, which I don't listen to her too much, but Rhonda Patrick. She talks all about the sauna and like sulforaphane, which is basically this compound found in broccoli sprouts, which is anti-cancer and really good for longevity. And so I started like, whoa, that's really cool. I'm going to look into that. Went down all these rabbit holes, started diving into their podcasts, listening to them relentlessly, and then it led into all these different areas. So Max Lugavere's dope, Ben Greenfield, Aaron Alexander. These are all individuals I highly encourage you guys to look into. Dave Asprey, some of these guys have just like started looking into the beginning stages. And now, it's at the point now where I'm having conversations with them briefly on Instagram and stuff like that. So it's just like, whoa, this is really cool. Like, these are the people that I look up to as mentors. They weren't direct mentors, but they're people I listened to, took advantage of their free content. And now it's leading to the aspect where I can start becoming that person myself, So it's like this endless thing that's, it's never ending for all of us. Like, for anyone out there listening too, it's like, we all start somewhere. Some of the biggest figures you see in athleticism and, speaking on stage for TED Talks, whatever it may be, they started somewhere. They all started somewhere. They started in the pits and understanding like, where do I go from here? And they were very confused. And now they have this confidence because they really worked on that muscle of the mind. And so, yeah, I'm just very blessed, man. I think it's so cool that we have this technology at our fingertips, and it can either be something very good or it can be our greatest enemy.
Really well said. And that is such a primary challenge for so many people right now, where it's they're using the phone and are learning a lot, but others, I say most people, the phone is using them, and they're being really taken advantage of by Netflix, various TV dramas that they're not learning anything from, or pornography where they're being sucked into this, lizard brain attraction, or whatever, online arguments about, nonsense that is just going to be raising stress levels and distracting the mind from learning and ascending on the path of some true purpose and meaning in life. And I know another teacher for me, all those ones that you mentioned were big influences on my life. Another one was Paul Chek has been a tremendous.
Yes. I was just thinking him right now.
Yeah. He's the man too. Yeah. And you think about, I think a cool thing to think about is how each of these people, they must have changed millions of lives with this, between like all of them, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of lives, like by extension, like through the ripple effect.
Oh, by extension. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It's crazy to think about. Now you have the power to inspire other people to become, at that same level. And we're talking about in the awakening earlier, like this is it at like a tangible, fundamental level. We have these people who are like artists, athletes, advocates, activists, teachers, and they're like combining all these skills and spreading out through this internet to awaken others and empower this grassroots movement. It's a beautiful thing that's happening. And a lot of people hate on technology, but we've got so much power within the palm of our hands.
It's not the technology that's the issue. It's like a fat person blaming the spoon to make them fat. It's not the spoon making them fat. It's the fat person picking up the spoon, which is making them fat, right? It's not guns killing people. It's the person pulling the trigger of the gun, right? I love those metaphors because it's like, whoa, you take a step back, you're like, oh, that is very true, actually. Logically speaking, it's not the material or the inanimate object. It's the person using that tool. And how is it used? Is it used for good, or is it used for evil, or is it supporting you, or is it hindering you, right? And I love how you point that out, because it's like, yeah, these devices, like they can be great, they're wonderful. It's just the relationship you cultivate with it. Like I've been down the heaps on that stuff, man, when it comes to these phones and things, pornography, like it's gone down the tracks and all of that. And that's why I'm so excited to help others with it, because I've figured out the quote unquote crack the code in many ways, which, it doesn't mean I'm always going to be that way, but for the majority of my life, it's been troubles with it. And now I've gotten to that point where it's like, okay, I understand myself. I understand my triggers, the mechanisms that lead into some of these bad habits, and working through that, there's so many ways, depending on who you are.
What are some of those ways that you've leveraged in order to get a grip on technology and your mindset, as the person holding, the gun or the spoon or the phone?
Yeah. I would say, man, the biggest thing you can do is, of course, define the why. Like, why do you want to change in the first place? You always go back to that mindset of like the core why, or the purpose, the mission you want to achieve, the goal around it, the vision. Really get deep on that and dig into the emotions of it, not just surface level facade. Like, oh, like for instance, if I want to get fit, because, I want to look good in the mirror, look good naked. Well, what does that mean? Go another layer or two deeper. Well, if I can look better naked, I can begin to go on the beach and feel proud and confident in my body. And then I can be able to talk to women better. Okay, what does that lead to? Well, then I can have, a better relationship with her and eventually build a family. Okay, you're getting somewhere, right? So just get really deep with certain things and really define where that's coming from. So for me, when it comes to these technological changes I've made, it's definitely defining the why. Well, there's two reasons. It's the positive that's associated with it, and then there's the negative. Well, the negative is like I feel absolutely depressed after doing something I know I shouldn't be doing with my devices. So, okay, what does that lead to? Go some layers deeper with that, right? Now does that lead down the wormhole of the why? And then the positives can inspire change too. But I actually like to say, even with clients, like focus on the positive, have a good clear-cut vision of that. But if you don't even know what the positive feels like because you've been spending the majority of your life in the bad habits, then connect the reasons to the negative association of continually doing it, right? That can actually inspire change much more than the positive. For me personally, even going down this whole life path of health and wellness and just obsessing and supporting others with it, it was primarily through a lot of the difficulties I had in my personal life. Like I share with my little sister, or my health issues that erupted with gut health, or the alcohol abuse, the anger, some of those moments that were really just triggering to my soul. And I just feel those deep emotions associated with it. It's much more profound in my life versus the positive things that came out of it, right? And I didn't really know what the positives felt like at the time until I actually worked on them. Then I felt that. So it's like, okay. So that's what I recommend to all you guys. Like if you want to inspire change or cultivate a healthier relationship with your technology, for example, define the why and the change of the why by the negative association of continually going down that path. And that can really inspire you down that. So habits that can help you out. Well, dopamine, man, just working with the dopamine system. Like, that is the motivation molecule, right? It makes us motivated to continue doing an activity at hand. So TikTok's a great example of captivating and capturing your dopamine system, right? You see all these colors, these sounds, these different algorithms set up to pick it up, and you keep scrolling. You see another video that's a minute long, then you see another that's 15 seconds. It's like it's just constantly engaging and stimulating the dopamine system to where if you're on it for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes past, all of a sudden it's like an hour, then you turn it off, you're like, whoa, I had this consciousness and this awareness that, man, I've been on this for an hour. Then you feel really down and depressed because your dopamine's been whacked out, then it goes below baseline. Those are the moments that you feel, you close your eyes and you catch yourself in that consciousness. Put the phone down, put it away, turn it off in those exact moments, and immediately divert. Instead of getting down and depressed and whatever, immediately shift your attitude into gratitude, into a different activity that can support your dopamine system. So something as simple as just do 20 push-ups, like have a default mechanism that you can refer back to, or go on a walk immediately, leave the phone, just like immediately change the habit at hand into something else. Don't wait for another 5 minutes or whatever and think about what you should do next. Immediately, just if something sprouts in your head, like this is it, immediately start doing that habit. That's helped me a ton. And then over time, I start integrating more of the good habits that serve me, like reading a book or journaling and those types of things. So that's one of the things I recommend. And also just dopamine detoxes. Have you done a dopamine detox before, Case?
Not intentionally.
I've done it once. I got to be honest, like a super intentional one. a long-term one, I should say, but like 7+ days, and it's not something that should be daunting. It should be something that's exciting, right? And it's all about igniting the dopamine so you don't feel the depletion from cutting out the thing that is not serving you. So like if it is the phone use you're excessively on, or TikTok, what other activities can you do to keep that dopamine high? For me, it's the cold plunge. That immediately, 3 to 4 minutes in that 40-degree water can raise dopamine levels by 250% for 4 or 5 hours after. Like this is a steady rise in dopamine, which is such cool, neuroscience we've come to find out. So I think that's really profound. It's taking cold showers, cold soaks to rekindle the dopamine system. Saunas, working out is really effective. Getting sunlight, like all these little variables that aren't really tasking. They just help rebalance your circuitry. So those are some of the examples that come to mind for me.
Beautiful examples. That's a really powerful principle to have in place. I love that example of when you finish something that makes you feel sort of shameful, or as if you've gone down the wrong path or fell down that slippery slope of I'm just going to watch 1 or 2 TikToks. An hour later, you're like confused. You've got like, it's just, you have no idea what's going on. You've just watched like 70 TikToks in a row. And we all know that brain, that like scramble brain of you just like, got sucked into the algorithm, and having that way of just like, okay, put your phone down, go for a walk, do 20 push-ups, just get your heart pumping, get out in nature, and just kind of recalibrate your system so that you can kind of return back to the path to just like having a good life instead of being, because we all get sucked into these things. And I, one thing I could sort of add to this conversation in a way is to look at the other sort of neurochemicals as well that make us feel good. Ones like oxytocin or endorphins or serotonin. And so if we have the dopamine system, we can also sort of balance or reintegrate towards these other ones as well. Like oxytocin is a great one, petting a dog if you have one, or giving a hug to someone, or giving yourself a massage if you have no other, animals around to touch. And, serotonin is great because like that would be, something like if you take on a creative project and then like making progress towards that, whatever it is, making a painting, making a podcast, launching a website, just like each step you take towards that, you'll get some serotonin, like, okay, I'm making progress towards some like long-term future goal. That feels really good. And it's something that you can integrate into everyday life. And then endorphins, of course, we all love endorphins, just like doing a high intensity interval workout or any kind of movement practice where you've got your heart pumping and your body's just flooding, the runner's high, as they call it. That can be, through any movement practice.
What comes up for me right now, I have to share this, the whole idea of like men primarily are dopamine dominant, women are primarily serotonin dominant. And so how does this apply to daily life? Well, basically women really enjoy conversations with their other women and whatever, they'll talk all the time in their groups and stuff and their friends. Men are typically hanging out together and working on a project together. So that's more dopamine related versus the serotonin, which is so unique. I love psychology in that degree. And so, I guess the reason I bring this up is like for the majority of us men, dopamine, we tend to be more dopamine depleted than women because, it's easier for us to start navigating the dopamine in the wrong habits or activities or whatever it may be. And so that's something to be aware of, for us guys is, and then dopamine is also correlated with testosterone in many ways. So if your dopamine is very high, that motivation's high, testosterone usually rise synergistically with that, which is crazy. But then it can go below baseline if it depletes, right? So testosterone will also go down because that motivation goes down from the dopamine. So it's a very interesting orchestra of just what occurs in our bodies all the time. The symphony of just, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin you mentioned, adrenaline, like how do these all work together? And I like to think almost along the lines of astrology and comparing astrology to a lot of these neurotransmitters and how they can apply to your personality trait. Like for me, I'm extremely, just knowing myself, very hard charging with dopamine. I just have a naturally high amount of dopamine. Other friends of mine that I'm really good friends with, like my friend Gabriel, he's super dominant in serotonin. Like he's just really, high in the serotonin in different ways. But he also is really high in dopamine too. But, my whole idea I'm bringing up and cultivating here is that it associates with personality, just how your neurotransmitters are. And I think the better you can understand your dominant neurotransmitter, maybe even acetylcholine for that matter, you can work and navigate through some of these habits a little bit more effectively.
Beautiful. My mind's going to veering off a little bit into the unknown, a bit into the ineffable now, is with if we go a layer deeper and think about something like your vibration or your aura, like that sort of concept and how all this kind of interplays into that. How do you think about that, and like what's the integration there of like how you live your life versus how your vibration, your frequency, and your aura kind of comes about as a result of that, and then how that sort of shapes reality going forward? Like, what do you make of sort of all that sort of thought space?
Yeah, man. I mean, we hear so basically, like, with the different chakra system is what I think about, and how a lot of us, just coming to mind right now, at least in how I see societies, we're very detached from our root in that sacral region. We tend to be so heady with everything, right? I was this guy too back in the day. And what I mean by this is we tend to think more logically, or just like think versus feel. And so going off of that, I find we can manifest and actually create the reality we want by feeling more versus thinking more. And this is very apparent with the men I work with, is we're very hard driving, business oriented, success driven. All that's great. Super powerful. Keep working towards that. But if you aren't feeling into the emotions of where you want to go in life, success is bullshit. It doesn't mean anything if you aren't happy. And happiness starts with the feeling deep in the sacral region. And so, working deeply, even just like sexual energy, if we connect back to our root and not be so like indoctrinated into a system, unfortunately, religion's been skewed over the years too. And I identify as a Christian in different ways, but I think religion's been skewed over the years as well. Over the past 200, 300 years, it's been skewed in a way where we've been told like masturbation is really bad, or just touching yourself and just like connecting to that area is bad. And, there's lust associated with that. And we've been, at a very young age, the majority of us into that system of Catholicism and whatever it may be with Christianity, we've been told that's bad to connect down to there. But it's not necessarily that cultivating that sexual energy is bad, for example. It's the association of pornography today that's associated with it, or maybe a lustful mindset with it, or something along those lines, can detach us from that, because it's going back to the head. It's going less out of the feeling of that. So, I bring that up just for example, because that's one thing I've been working on over the past years. How do I cultivate this sexual energy while practicing semen retention, while doing so without pornography or a screen, and just really feeling into that and getting deep into that intuition, deeper area of our body? Because sexual energy is creative energy. It really is. You're creating another life source energy through sexual energy when two partners come together. And so, you can work on this before you get into an intimate relationship, and, whatever. I can go down a whole track with that. But my whole point is, I think, going off of what you asked about, your frequency affects what you can achieve in life. And that's the law of attraction. Wherever your mindset is at, you're going to start bringing and feeding that energy in. So if you're in a negative aspect of life and you're always woe is me, and the world's out to get me, and fuck this, fuck that, all that negative stuff, you're going to feed more of that energy, because that's where the energy's going, right? But if you're in a mindset of like, oh, I'm grateful for what I have, even though I don't have the best, I'm very grateful for this. I'm grateful for being able to have a car. I'm grateful for being able to have two legs that work. I'm grateful to be even able to wake up this morning and, even just open my eyes. Even though I'm not the most energized or ambitious right now, I'm grateful for that. That attitude of gratitude, going back to that, is what's going to feed more of that in your life. And I have been really cultivating that lately. Is being careful with my lingo, my words, because words have so much power. And all this affects your frequency. Like, Case, you've probably been in a room with people and you're just like, I don't like the energy in this room. Like, I feel like the people talking and mingling, there's an energy there. It's not necessarily the people themselves and what they're saying or how they're looking. It's just like there's an energy currency in there that doesn't feel right. Then you may walk in a room, or you may go to like a sound healing ceremony or something that's cool with a yoga practice. And all these people are talking and mingling. And you're just like, whoa, I can feel magnified right now. This is amazing. Or going to a retreat, and everyone's in that like just heart space that you feel is magnifying their aura. A book I like to go back to is Celestine Prophecy. Have you read that before?
No.
Oh, dude, highly recommend it. The Celestine Prophecy is so cool. It's basically this like fiction story of this guy who ends up traveling to, I believe, Peru or to some South American village, and he's on a mission to discover these insights. And there's 10 insights. And the government is suppressing these insights and doing whatever they can to snatch them and kill off anyone that sees them or captures them. It's the most profound, crazy story, adventure-seeking story, but it's very spiritually intertwined, that when this guy discovers every insight, first insight, second insight, third insight. They're all based on certain like superpowers that can help you evolve consciousness. So like I forgot some of the main ones, but some of them is like related to like some of the Four Agreements work, where it's like Don Miguel Ruiz talks about like don't take things personal. There's one of those that's related to like don't take things personal. And so if you have that really intertwined into your heart, you start magnifying that aura and that consciousness. And so Celestine Prophecy is freaking dope. There's like 3 books in the series. I haven't read all of them, but James Redfield is the overall author. That was one of the most inspiring books I've read back in the day. So, but it all goes back to that, man. Like the aura affects where we go.
Love that. I'm definitely going to check out that book, The 10 Insights. And you mentioned The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, also a really powerful sort of life-changing book. Some of, these, it's crazy how we can come across books that are filled with ideas. We take these ideas and integrate them into our mind, and then it completely changes our life. And we were talking earlier how this is, done through podcasts and social media. There are various mediums that we can sort of express these ideas and be creative to sort of make the world a better place. And it's all kind of starting with what we just described, sort of the foundation of what we are, and, being grateful and being optimistic, and then using that strong foundation of a way to sort of create and bend reality in a way based off that sort of higher sort of frequency and vibration. And I am curious what you think of creativity and the imagination. Like what is happening there from what you can tell?
I think creativity is one of those things, and like imagination, you mentioned like visualization, that is becoming the true superpower today, because a lot of us are relying on other people's creativity to inspire creativity. And creativity and imagination, I think it believes it comes from within. It doesn't have to come from the outside. Now, in many ways in my life, I've been inspired by other people, but I kind of mold it into my own format, which is my own creativity of, making it work for me and my personality and what I enjoy, which everyone can relate with, of course. But I think most of the time it can be something that it's more powerful when it's completely sprouted from within. Like maybe it's a random thought you had 10 years ago or whatever, and you molded it into something today. You may not even know where it came from, but that's the whole idea. That's what I think creativity is. And I think creation through life force is the ultimate flex in today's world, because nowadays we're creating other people's dreams. We're not creating our own. We're working for the big man. We're working for corporate, whatever. And it's okay. It's fine. It's totally fine. If you're doing that right now, it's awesome. But understand that you are a human being that can create. You're a human creating. You're a human being. You're not a human doing. And so working for someone else and creating someone else's dream is just the most devastating thing for all of us. When we come to that realization, we're like, I'm not doing that anymore. It's time to create my own and start a side hustle, start entrepreneurship, start creating something that can really make that impact on the world. Because the most free people on the planet are people that have created their own business or created their own idea, which sprouted into something great. And other people caught on to that as like, hey, I like what this is doing. I like what, where this is going with this. I want to support that. I want to invest in it financially, or I want to support it and talk about it, network about it, whatever. Like you creating this podcast, for instance, it says a lot about what you enjoy putting into the world. You're not looking for return on investment necessarily. You're just doing this out of good heartedness and intrinsic motivation. That's the number one thing too. Speaking of creativity, is like intrinsically inspired, where it's not done from an outside force inspiring it, like in that degree of like holding you accountable from the outside is awesome too, but if you can really inspire that change from within, that's where you see the results. What we were talking about goal setting earlier too, it's like, okay, if you really want to have the 7 layers deep or whatever it may be, think about what is the depth of that. Is it really based on your parents wanting you to do something, go to college because your parents want you to? That good example of that. And get a good job, get a good paying job, build a family. Like that's all your thing based on your parents' story. Or are you creating a story yourself, right? You catch that riff?
Absolutely. That was a beautiful riff. I am already feeling more inspired and invigorated to create more just from hearing that riff. It's like, yeah. And this is the energy where it's like, I sometimes feel like some sort of an antenna or like a tuning fork, where when I'm in alignment with sort of nature Mother Nature, God, Gaia, so whatever language you want to use. Like when I feel like more in alignment, when I'm on point, when I've got my habits sort of set, it feels like I'm more creative. I get more ideas, and I have more energy to sort of kind of create things. Like it could be everything. Like even the breath that I took, that's a creative one. I chose to make it deeper, chose to make it more full, and now I'm gonna have a little bit more energy because I had the intention to be more creative in that moment with my breath, and then that goes out deeper to the words that I'm speaking, to the ideas that I'm having, to the relationships that I'm cultivating, and it's such a deep and powerful way to perceive the world. And there was this amazing book that I read recently called Wetiko. It was about a soul sickness that is plaguing mankind. And I think we're all familiar with like mental illness and physical illness, but like a spirit sickness or a soul illness is like sort of a new concept, or at least for me, it was kind of mind blowing. And the way to remediate that is to be creative. And a lot of people are suffering from consuming too much, and they're not creating, and they're suffering from Wetiko, this horrible soul sickness that is inflicting us at a collective sort of critical mass level. And the simple act of being creative is such a powerful way to become more human, just as you said, to become more of a creative being, and to make life better at a fundamental root level.
It is, yeah. It's all starting from the soul, and the thing is too, it's hard to connect to the soul when everything's connected to the the iPhone, and it's like that's the thing. And one thing I was thinking recently is just how the whole design of the iPhone. Okay, so you got like the apple, and it was bitten out of the origination of like Adam and Eve, and how like it was tempted by the snake, and she ended up being an apple and whatnot, and that led into a whole different rodeo for the state of human beings, and it's selling your soul basically. And there's a lot of things coming out. I know you're going into conspiracies. This isn't a conspiracy. This is just raw and real. Like technology is advancing rapidly. I mean, we're seeing like Chat GPT and all these things with AI that are just immensely fast. And I don't know where this is all going to lead. I mean, where do you think this is going to lead in the next 2 to 5 years? Like, I mean, even this year, like over the past year, Chat GPT wasn't even like a thing. And now it's talked about everywhere. Everyone's utilizing that.
Yeah. The artificial intelligence, and on one hand it feels sort of scammy, like NFTs. It has that similar vibration to that, where a few years ago everyone was talking about NFTs. It was like NFT this, NFT that, NFTs are going to be everything, and then okay, that faded away, and now AI, it's like AI is going to be everything. It's like sort of similar vein, but in the other hand, like you said, it is advancing very fast, and we can see this taking some jobs potentially from people, and evolving evolving our civilization to one of two places. One could be a land of totalitarian control and deep darkness, and the other could be a very bright one in which we're able to leverage this technology to be more human, to have more free time. Nobody likes working 40 hours a week, and most of us are having to work 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week just to pay the bills, and nobody wants to do that unless you're working on your own business, and like doing it from a place of like authentic soul level flourishing and thriving. And we really do have opportunity to take this thing, integrate it into our tools to make civilization run more smoothly, and be able to enjoy more free times. Like that's the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, and we can build that if we're intentional, if we start at a root level with these things that we're talking about that are so important and essential to be able to be someone who can see the truth clearly and come from a place of a good heart.
Yes, dude. Yes. And like, I think today I have a bright vision for the future. I think a lot of people have this more morbid idea of what the future holds, and I see it all the time through a lot of the stuff being portrayed on. I don't watch Netflix all too often, but some of these, what is it called? Where basically Hollywood's like anticipating by putting things out there to where we almost become desensitized to it, like certain like storylines in many ways of like what the future holds, like Black Mirror, for example. Have you seen Black Mirror for any of theirs? Dark, man. I kind of wish I didn't watch any of that because that's downloaded to my head now. Speaking of subconscious downloads, like I'm very careful of that nowadays. But whether it's music or movies, whatever, like being very careful what I'm putting through my eyes, because I know there's some stuff in my noggin that I don't necessarily want coming up again. But yeah, with the whole idea of like them transcripting the future in many ways, or desensitizing us through AI control, robotic life, moving away from connection to nature, fast food, poor food, like just things like that. That's not necessarily serving, not necessarily, it's for sure not serving us. And it's disconnecting from that spirit, that soul we were just talking about. And I have a good vision for the future. I think many people are, quote unquote, waking up. Be very careful with where you're directing your energy, because it's all a part of the plan to distract you and take you away from you cultivating a true empowerment for the people and the planet. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
That's so essential. Where focus goes, energy flows. And what I've been seeing this past, this awakening that we're riffing on, it really is happening. Like, more people are aware of big food, big pharma. The fact that, like, hey, sunscreen like that is going to cause more harm than good. You don't need that goop on your skin. It's not protected. It's protecting you from health. Like, the sun is a source of healing. Like, what are we doing with this stuff? I did just the other day, I heard there's some firemen walking down the street. I was just hanging out by the pier here, and they were like, hey, one guy said, hey, have you heard of this? Have you heard of earthing? And the guy's like, what is that? When you like stick your bed to like the wall? He's like, no, it's when you have your bare feet in the earth. And I was like, oh, people are talking about this like in public now. It's like, yeah,
I
this is what we
love
need.
that.
It's like, that's what I'm talking about. And there's this huge interest now in homesteading. Like, people are getting land, they're getting bees, they're getting chickens, they're getting cows. There's a massive increase in the interest in raw milk, raw dairy, which is a huge healing factor. Like, the fact that we've been pasteurizing milk for decades now, and everyone's
Right.
like, oh, I'm lactose intolerant. It's like, lactose intolerant, like that's I used to think
never
that
existed.
never existed. Yeah, there's so much cool stuff happening, and then even just like the pushback against plant-based eating. I know I was damaged from the Netflix propaganda pushing plant-based eating. So many people now are waking up and saying, me too. Like, I was messed up by that, and meat healed me, eating liver heals me. All this is trending upward in a good direction, and it's building this like grassroots level, foundational swell, and it's just going to keep burning, keep rising, and soon it's going to be a flaming ember as we're becoming sovereign beings and breaking free from big food, breaking free from big pharma, and becoming empowered Homo sapiens. And who knows what beautiful world we're going to be able to create with that powerful energy, but it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think it's an interesting concept. Speaking of psychology, again, relating to the mind of humans, is it's so much easier to go onto the spectrum of one side and one side, whether it's like full Democrat, they're like, I hate the Democrats, I'm going to be a conservative or whatever now. It's like, and then slingshotting from full vegan all the way to carnivore, and then taking a leap from, working out relentlessly every day of the week to, no, I'm just going to do, like one day, every so often or whatever. It's like interesting, the concept of human beings' brains, and how we find it very easy. There's an ease to going all out on anything versus just finding that beautiful temperance and balance. As the Stoics would say, find what is essential, know what is essential, find that sweet spot, the temperance, one of the four Stoic virtues. That's one thing that's like one of my mantras, is like finding that balance, that temperance in those areas of life, because I've been through, the storms of like being fully like vegan for a moment, eating a lot more heavy animals. And then I just incorporated both. Like, okay, that feels a lot better for my body. I think omnivorous eating is scarce nowadays. And so kudos to anyone who's eating omnivore, like, mad respect. The Last of Us. And just that perspective of having a balance when it comes to tech and nature. Like, it's not about just cutting out all of technology. That's ridiculous. You're not going to thrive whatsoever. You're going to be cut out from all of society's, being connected to anyone, really. So instead of going Amish mode, why don't we just find, a balance with technology and nature? And so I think it's interesting, that whole concept, though, of psychology, and finding that middle spectrum, that balance between all these different areas of life, instead of going all out and wholeheartedly in one direction, which creates division, which we're seeing today. Is like, it's all about divisiveness and division, like, versus just acceptance and unity. It's such a scarce thing to see nowadays, is someone that's completely heart-centered in both directions.
Really beautiful point. Yeah, I think that this is so scarce, this perception that you have, this idea of like integrating and harmonizing between these polarities that people seem to be pushing, which is probably driven through social media to some extent. And, everyone
Oh,
wants to be.
100%, dude. I mean, like, one thing that's been bothering me lately, I'm just going to go down a rabbit hole for a second for all you guys, is the feminist movement just really irks me. And it's because it's creating more division. It's not necessarily amplifying the beauty and the nurturing, loving, caring aspects of a woman and the feminine energy associated with it. Instead, it's amplifying it through a masculine energy, feminine energy, like basically just pushing this feminine energy in a masculine way, a dominant shadow aspect of masculine way. So it's this facade of like, this is good and nurturing for society, is empowering women. And it has a great heart-centered approach to it, which I totally see. But that's the facade layer. If you dig deep into it, it's creating more division. Like if you're only pushing women and women's right and feminism, it's like, well, that's shutting down men. It's making us feel inferior. And then all of a sudden it makes us just feel like off too as men. So why don't we just work on cultivating divine feminine light and divine masculine light and putting that together into the world? Because feminine can't survive without masculine. So how is feminism even a thing if we don't even talk about divine masculinity? It's all about toxic masculinity today. All the politicians are toxic masculine. They're disconnected. They're all that stuff associated with it. It's just a very interesting concept that comes up for me quite often, is seeing this propaganda on social media that it looks like it's empowering women, but there's this deeper level, almost like this deep state kind of control, whatever. We could get into wormholes with that. I'm not even creating division here. I just want people to like think about this stuff and research it a little deeper, because I'm not even either or on this. I'm just coming up with things spewing out of my head that I think about. It's a slingshot approach, man.
Yeah, I mean, when you really start free associating about these things, it's like the feminist movement, although it had many good elements, a lot of these movements that are funded by big business interests do have amazing, alluring conceptual sort of facades. Like the plant-based movement, on its face, it's like, oh, this is better for the environment, better for the animals, better for the humans. As you dig deeper, oh, none of that is actually true. And for the feminist movement, for example, birth control was a way that they were providing women with the ability to join the workforce and be more, you don't have to have a cycle, that's an optional, that's a thing of the past.
Right.
And meanwhile, this pill is disconnecting them from the flow, from the life cycle of what it means to be a woman in a lot of ways, like having that rhythm and that powerful hormonal surge that makes someone who they are. And the amount of suffering that has been caused by the birth control pill has been immense, but people are also waking up to this. Like I've seen so many people now getting off birth control and telling others like, hey, this is a poison pill. And that was the name of a documentary that is exceptional. I believe it was called Poison Pill, but I'll link it down below regardless, and along with all the other resources that we've spoken about, because we've touched on some great ones, kind of building a better sort of perception as to what are some of the things happening, how are they being pushed by big business, and how can we as humans, work through this and find a way to be our best selves and provide a higher level of service and creativity out onto the world. It's deep stuff, man. It's deep stuff, but we got to make our way through it. We got to make our way through it.
Yeah, I think it's just having conversations like this that really make the biggest dent. It's not necessarily like getting bogged down into all the minutia of it. It's just like, how do we just have a simple conversation about it? And like not doing so out of a judgmental mentality. Like, when it comes to some of these conversations I've had with friends that are, let's say, on a totally different wavelength with some of these things, and they aren't even aware of it, you can totally tell. That's one of those things I bring it up in a way by asking questions and not necessarily telling what I believe, because that doesn't do shit. Like whenever our society is all about tell. Like, Case, when you grow up, don't do this, do that. Case, stop doing that. Like, Case, you're going to grow up and do this, man. It's like our whole society, our parents didn't know what to do either, because they were taught by parents that didn't know what to do, and it just creates this generational thing. But basically, the whole idea is like the simple art of asking versus telling. So beautiful. Humble Inquiry. There's actually a book on that called that. It's really powerful. Humble Inquiry is a powerful book. It's all about just like literally asking questions. It's not about telling people what to do or telling them how you feel or telling them. It's just like, hey, how do you feel when I do this? Versus like, hey, I feel this way. It's not as effective, right? So if it's like a convincing factor that is an odd like reverse psychology, where you're getting people to discover the truth from within versus you telling the truth. Going back to what we said in the beginning about something coming from the outside in, it's not going to be as effective. But if you can kindle that flame from within people, that's going to really make the biggest change. That's what happened for me a lot of times is, I was hanging out with certain people that were mentors of mine. They were asking me questions that brought up these insights from within, like, oh, wow, that's a great way to think about it. Or like, oh, okay, so this is what I need to do. And that's what I work with my clients on too. Is like, I'm not going to tell them what to do. They always are like, dude, just give me the blueprint. Give me the list of all I need to do. And I'm like, I could do that. Let's see how effective that is for a week. We can test that out. But what really helps them out is asking them like, okay, how do you feel when you do that? Or what can you do better? Things like that can really inspire that change from within. And that's a powerful way to convince people. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that too? I know this is like a whole discussion on psychological communication.
Yeah, that's really the key. I believe we've gone full circle here, kind of described a lot of tactics and strategies that can be used along with the deeper sort of key in the keyhole, the insight, the core theme of what we are dancing around it and striving to elucidate and articulate is this idea that within each and every one of us is this deep power, is this light. And if we're able to align our activities in a way that activates that light and allows it to shine forth, that's how we're going to be our best selves. That's how we're going to have the best possible life here on earth. If each and every one of us becomes that lighthouse, shining the light and becoming the best version of ourselves, and everything that you're doing to put out into the world is helping people achieve that state, and you're leading by example. And I really appreciate all the work that you do each and every day to make that happen and to push this power forward, because it's awesome stuff. And I've been grateful to be in dialogue with you here on this. I've learned a lot, and I hope everyone listening has enjoyed the conversation as well. Is there any last learning idea or story that you'd like to share with everybody listening?
I think the biggest thing, that comes up for me a lot of times is patience and, really thinking before speaking. I've always had that difficulty in the past. And not the word always. I want to take that word out, actually, because that word actually programs my future by saying the word always, because that's referring to the past. I'm using that as a thing to kindle the future. So be careful with those words, too. Speaking of which, guys, it's the word always and never. Like, oh, that never happens. Or it's like, no, it actually just did happen. With that being said, though, words have power, abracadabra, that control your future. And so for me, the biggest thing that I have made adjustments to in my life is really being careful with the way I communicate and being very considerate with the way I communicate externally and also internally, my self-talk. And so, I've had major issues with that in the past. And going forward, it's one of those things I'm completely committed to, is how I can help others inspire that change too, because that programs your reality is those words. Think of it like a little algorithm you're setting up for the computer, and how that fast RAM runs, or whatever the speed of the computer. If you have all these different random tabs up that haven't been addressed with all these crazy words, it's time to click through those and remove those words so you can start creating a simplistic, energetic, fast-paced brain and future. So that's one thing I would end with, is just be very considerate of your words, guys. Patience is key, wrapped around that, and really think before you speak. Really feel before you speak.
Powerful. Christian, thank you.
Thank you, brother. It's been a joy. I love going through this stuff, and excited to move forward in this crazy thing called life.
Beautiful.